Have you ever stopped to ask yourself the most uncomfortable question about King Solomon? We all know the story. He was the wisest man who ever lived. He built the temple of God. He was the wealthiest king in history. But there is a dark shadow over his reign that most people are too afraid to investigate. The Bible tells us in 1 Kings chapter 11 that Solomon had 700 royal wives and 300 concubines. That is 1,000 women. Let us look at this number with cold, hard logic. 1,000 women is not a family. That is the size of a military battalion. If Solomon spent just one single night with each woman, it would take him nearly 3 years just to see them all once. Think about that. Solomon was the busiest CEO of the ancient world. He was managing trade routes, building cities, and judging a nation. He did not have time for 1,000 romantic relationships. It is physically and logistically impossible. So we have to ask the question, why did he do it? The church often tells us that Solomon simply fell into the sin of lust. They say he was a man with a weakness for women. But does that explanation really satisfy you? Does it make sense that the man gifted with divine wisdom would commit the most foolish mistake in history? In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 17, verse 17, God gave a specific command to the future kings of Israel. He said, "Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away." Solomon knew this law. He wrote the book of Proverbs. He knew the consequences. Yet he broke this law on an industrial scale. Why? The answer is not lust. The answer is much more calculating, and it is much more terrifying. Solomon was not building a harem for pleasure. He was building a library. He was a scholar, and like a mad scientist, he was collecting specimens. Solomon was not just marrying women, he was marrying into specific bloodlines. He was collecting the daughters of foreign kings, the high priestesses of strange gods, and the royalty of nations that God had cursed. He was bringing the DNA of the pagan world into the holy city of Jerusalem. He was trying to unite all the spiritual powers of the ancient world under his control. He treated these women as portals to the supernatural knowledge he craved. Solomon thought he was the master of these forces. He thought he was collecting trophies. But he was actually bringing a spiritual infection right into the heart of God's kingdom. He was not just collecting wives. He was collecting deities. And as we are about to see, some of these bloodlines carried a very ancient and very dangerous genetic marker.
If we want to understand the crime, we must investigate the accomplices. Let us open the Bible to 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1. The scripture gives us a very specific list of the women Solomon loved. It says he loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. Most people read this list and just see names of nations, but a forensic investigator sees something else. This is not a random list of neighbors. If you take a map of the ancient world and overlay it with the history of the giants and the fallen angels, a terrifying pattern emerges. Solomon was strategically marrying into the specific hotspots of the Nephilim bloodlines. Let us analyze the profile of these brides, one by one. Exhibit A, the daughter of Pharaoh. This was the first political alliance Solomon made. But Egypt was more than just a powerful neighbor. Egypt was the world's center of sorcery and magic. The pharaohs believed they were the direct descendants of the gods. They believed they carried divine blood. By marrying the daughter of Pharaoh, Solomon was not just securing a border. He was importing the ancient mystery school of Egypt into his own palace. He was bringing in a woman raised in the dark arts of the Nile, a woman who carried the genetic arrogance of a god king. Exhibit B, the Zidonians or the Sidonians. The Bible explicitly mentions the women of Sidon. This is a crucial detail. Sidon was the capital of the Phoenicians. Why is this dangerous? Because Sidon is the home of the worship of Ashtoreth. She was known as the Queen of Heaven, or Ishtar. In the ancient texts, she is often associated with the entities that descended to earth. She is the mother figure of the Nephilim culture. But there is a more chilling connection here. The Sidonians are the same people who would later produce the most wicked woman in Bible history, Queen Jezebel. Think about that timeline. Solomon married into the royal line of Sidon. A few generations later, a Sidonian princess named Jezebel marries an Israelite king and hunts down the prophets of God. Solomon opened the door. He invited the spirit of Jezebel into Israel long before Jezebel herself was born. He was mixing the holy seed of David with the DNA of the Sidonian priestesses. Exhibit C, the Ammonites and the Moabites. This is where the genetic profile becomes truly disturbing. The Ammonites and the Moabites were not just pagan nations. Their very origin was cursed. Genesis chapter 19 tells us the dark story. Both of these nations were born from incest. They were the children of Lot and his own 2 daughters. From this twisted beginning, they grew into nations that worshipped the darkest entities in the demonic hierarchy, Molech and Chemosh. Molech was the abomination of the Ammonites. This was the god who demanded the sacrifice of children. He was often depicted as a bull-headed statue with arms of bronze, heated by fire, waiting to receive a living baby. Chemosh was the abomination of Moab, a god of war who also demanded human blood. But there is something else about the land of Ammon and Moab. If you read Deuteronomy chapter 2, the Bible tells us that these lands were formerly inhabited by the Emims and the Zamzumims. Who were they? The Bible says they were a people great and many and tall as the Anakims. They were giants. These lands were the last strongholds of the Rephaim, the post-flood giants. By marrying the princesses of Ammon and Moab, Solomon was marrying into the remnants of the giant clans. He was bringing women into his bed who carried the genetic memory of the Nephilim. The conclusion of the profile. So look at the harem again. Solomon did not just collect beautiful women, he collected high priestesses. In the ancient world, the daughter of a king was often the high priestess of the national god. The daughter of Pharaoh was a priestess of Ra. The Sidonian princess was a priestess of Ashtoreth. The Ammonite wife was a priestess of Molech. Solomon was surrounding himself with women who were trained in the occult arts. They were not passive observers. They were active agents of their gods. They were portals. Solomon, in his intellectual pride, thought he could study them. He thought he could analyze their beliefs, categorize their rituals, and perhaps even find the universal truth hidden in their DNA. He did not realize that he was the one being studied. He thought he was the master of the harem, but in reality, he was a prisoner in a spiritual laboratory run by 700 women who served the fallen ones. And what happens when the wisest man in the world gains access to the darkest secrets of the occult? He begins to experiment. This leads us to the most controversial aspect of Solomon's life, the forbidden knowledge that he did not find in the Torah, but in the whispers of his foreign wives.
We have established the motive. We have profiled the accomplices. Now we must examine the weapon. There is a strange detail in the Bible regarding the construction of Solomon's temple. 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 7 says that the house was built of stone made ready before it was brought there.
It says that there was neither hammer, nor axe, nor any tool of iron heard in the house while it was in building. Think about the engineering required for that. Massive stones, weighing hundreds of tons, were cut with laser precision and moved silently into place. No noise, no iron tools. How is this possible with Bronze Age technology? To find the answer, we have to look outside the standard 66 books of the Bible. We have to look at a document that has been suppressed, ignored, and labeled as heresy by the church for centuries. It is called the Testament of Solomon. This is not a storybook. It reads like a technical manual. It reads like a prison log. It is the personal diary of a man who has gone too far into the darkness. In this text, Solomon describes receiving a specific device. It was a signet ring, known in legends as the Seal of Solomon. The text says it was given to him by the archangel Michael to control a troublesome demon. But Solomon did not just use it for defense, he weaponized it. This is where the king of Israel transforms into the Sorcerer King. Solomon began to summon the entities of the dark world one by one. He did not banish them. He interrogated them. He demanded their names, their functions, and the specific stars they resided in. He was conducting a scientific experiment on the spirit world. The Testament of Solomon describes how Solomon summoned a powerful demon named Orneus. He bound him with the ring. Then he did something unthinkable. He ordered the demon to cut stones for the temple of God. He summoned Beelzebub, the prince of demons. Instead of fleeing in terror, Solomon commanded him to saw marble and transport the massive pillars that no human could lift. He summoned Asmodeus, the demon of lust and destruction. Solomon forced him to make clay for the vessels of the temple. Picture this scene. It is the ultimate paradox. The holiest building on earth, the dwelling place of Yahweh, was being constructed by the labor of hell. Solomon believed he had found the ultimate loophole. He thought, I am using the enemies of God to build the house of God. Surely this proves my wisdom. I have enslaved the darkness to serve the light. This was his fatal mistake. This was the intellectual pride that the outline warned us about. But where did he learn the intricate rituals to bind these high-level entities? The ring was just the tool. He needed the codes. He needed the incantations. This brings us back to the 700 wives. You do not learn how to control a Sidonian demon by reading the Torah of Moses. You learn it from a Sidonian high priestess. You do not know the secret name of the entity worshipped by the Ammonites unless you sleep with the daughter of the Ammonite king. These were his teachers. Every night in the private chambers of the palace, Solomon was not just having conversations with his wives. He was debriefing them. He was extracting their occult knowledge. Tell me the name of your God, he would ask. Tell me how your priests summon him. Tell me what he fears. The wives were the portals. They were the bridge between the physical world of Jerusalem and the spiritual underworld of their ancestors. Solomon created a massive occult network. He centralized the demonology of Egypt, Moab, Ammon, and Sidon. He thought he was the puppet master pulling the strings. In the Testament of Solomon, there is a chilling moment where Solomon asks a demon, "What is your activity?" The demon replies, "My activity is to bring division among men and to lead them astray." Solomon thought he was the one giving orders. He thought because he held the ring, he held the power. But he forgot a fundamental rule of spiritual warfare. You cannot play with fire without being burned. And you cannot invite 300 demons to a construction site without them leaving something behind. He thought he was using them to build a building, but they were using him to build a stronghold. While the demons were physically building the stone walls of the temple, they were spiritually dismantling the soul of the king. He was treating the spirit world like a machine. He viewed these entities as free energy, as slaves to be exploited. It was the mindset of a mad scientist. But demons are not machines. They are personalities. They are ancient, intelligent, and manipulative. And they were patient. They knew that as long as Solomon wore the ring, they had to obey. But they also knew that Solomon was mortal. He would grow old. His mind would weaken. His vigilance would fade. And they had 700 agents inside the palace, his wives, waiting for the moment to strike. This was not just a construction project. It was an infiltration. Solomon opened the gates of Jerusalem to the invisible army of the Watchers. He legitimized their presence. He gave them a job to do. And once the temple was finished, do you think they just went home? Do you think Beelzebub and Asmodeus politely returned to the abyss? No, they stayed. And in the next part of our investigation, we will see exactly where they went. We will see how the virus spread from the construction site to the very heart of the royal family. We're going to the Mount of Olives, but in Solomon's time, it was not a place of prayer. It was known as the Mount of Corruption.
We have seen the collection of wives. We have seen the summoning of demons. Now we must witness the result. This is the part of the story where the mad scientist loses control of his own experiment. If you go to Jerusalem today, you can look across the Kidron Valley to the Mount of Olives. It is a beautiful, holy place. But in the time of Solomon, it had a different name. In 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 13, the Bible calls it the Mount of Corruption. Why? Because this is where Solomon committed the ultimate treason. The Bible says in 1 Kings 11, verse 7, "Then did Solomon build a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Moab, the abomination of the children of Ammon." Read that carefully. It says Solomon built. He did not just allow it. He did not just turn a blind eye. He funded it. He authorized it. The king of Israel used the treasury of God to build altars for the enemies of God. And look at the geography. The phrase "before Jerusalem" means facing Jerusalem. Solomon built these pagan altars on the hill directly opposite the temple of God. He created a spiritual standoff. On one hill, the temple of Yahweh. On the other hill, the altars of the Nephilim gods. They were staring at each other. This was not religious tolerance. This was a spiritual invasion. The virus had infected the host. Solomon thought he would convert these women. He thought his wisdom was so powerful that he could bring them to the light. But the opposite happened. He did not convert them. They converted him. Let us look at the horror of what happened on those high places. We are not talking about lighting candles or burning incense. We are talking about Molech. The worship of Molech involved a bronze statue with outstretched arms. A fire was lit inside until the metal glowed red hot. And then a living child was placed into the burning arms of the idol. Historical texts tell us that priests would beat loud drums during this ritual. Why?
to drown out the screams of the dying child, so the parents would not hear them and regret their offering. Now, picture this scene. It is the most disturbing image in the Old Testament. King Solomon is standing there, the man who wrote the book of Proverbs, the man who famously solved the dispute between two mothers to save a baby's life. That same man is now standing on the Mount of Olives, watching the smoke rise, smelling the burning flesh, and listening to the drums. How is this possible? How does the wisest man become the most foolish? The Bible gives us the diagnosis in verse 4. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods. When he was old. This is the key. The infiltration was a slow poison. These women were not just wives, they were operatives. They were Nephilim princesses. They understood something that Solomon forgot. Wisdom is mental, but magic is biological. They used the oldest weapons in history, sex and sorcery. Just like the future Jezebel, they used their sexuality to cloud his judgment. They used potions and rituals to weaken his will. As Solomon's physical body grew weaker with age, the spiritual hold of these women grew stronger. They isolated him. They flattered his intellect while they destroyed his soul. They likely whispered to him, "Great king, your God is powerful, yes, but to be the king of the world, you must honor all the gods. You must know all the mysteries. Do not limit yourself to just one deity." It appealed to his pride. It appealed to his thirst for knowledge. But it was a trap. By building these altars, Solomon was not just worshiping idols. He was opening portals. He was anchoring the demonic principalities of the surrounding nations right into the soil of Jerusalem. He invited the gods of the giants to take up residence in the holy city. And the tragedy is, this infection did not stop with him. Solomon was the carrier of the virus, but the victims were the next generation. While Solomon was busy experimenting with the occult, who was raising his children? Who was raising the heir to the throne? The mothers, the Ammonite mother, the Sidonite mother. The serpent bloodline had successfully infiltrated the royal house of David. The DNA of the enemy was now flowing in the veins of the future kings of Israel. God saw this. God saw the genetic and spiritual corruption taking over the throne. And God knew he had to intervene. He could not let this hybrid empire continue. He had to perform a radical surgery. He had to quarantine the disease. This leads to the terrible consequence, the day the kingdom broke apart.
When Solomon died, he left behind more than just a kingdom. He left behind a genetic crisis. The experiment was over. The mad scientist was gone. But the laboratory was still open, and the results of his experiments were sitting on the throne. We need to look closely at the man who succeeded Solomon. His name was Rehoboam. History books often focus on his bad political decisions. They tell us he raised taxes and caused a rebellion, but that is the surface-level story. We are here for the deep truth. Let us look at his DNA. The Bible tells us in 1 Kings chapter 14, verse 21, that Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign. And then it gives us a crucial detail twice. It says, his mother's name was Naamah, an Ammonite. Naamah, an Ammonite princess. Remember what we learned in part 2? The Ammonites were the descendants of Lot's incest. They were the worshippers of Molech. They were a cursed bloodline. This means the new king of Israel, the man sitting on the throne of David, was half Ammonite. The holy bloodline of the Messiah had been compromised. The seed of the serpent had successfully mixed with the seed of the woman. Solomon's plan to unite the world through marriage had backfired. Instead of elevating the pagans, he had contaminated the holy line. God looked down at this situation. He saw a hybrid king on the throne. He saw altars to demons surrounding his temple. He saw a population infected with the worship of foreign gods. The infection was systemic. If God did nothing, the entire nation of Israel would become a pagan state, and the line of the Messiah would be lost forever in a sea of mixed genetics. So God performed a radical surgery. In medicine, when a limb is infected with gangrene, you do not treat it with bandage. You cut it off. You perform an amputation to save the rest of the body. The splitting of the kingdom of Israel was not just a political dispute. It was a divine quarantine. God tore the 10 northern tribes away from the house of David. He separated the bulk of the nation from the contaminated throne. Look at the map. The 10 northern tribes became the kingdom of Israel. This territory became the containment zone. And tragically, look at what happened there. Without the anchor of the temple and the Davidic line, the north spiraled into darkness immediately. This is where King Jeroboam set up the golden calves. This is where later on Ahab and Jezebel would rule. This is where the prophets of Baal would eventually outnumber the prophets of God 400 to 1. God allowed the north to be given over to the very entities Solomon had invited in. But he kept the south. God reserved the tiny kingdom of Judah. It was just 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. It was small, it was weak, but it had one critical mission: to protect the bloodline. God isolated Judah to ensure that despite Solomon's failure, despite Rehoboam's mixed blood, there would still be a remnant, a thin, fragile thread that would eventually lead to Jesus Christ. This is the terrible price of Solomon's experiment. The glorious empire was shattered. The golden age ended in ruin. Solomon wanted gnosis, that is the Greek word for knowledge. He wanted to know the secrets of the stars, the language of birds, and the powers of the underworld. He fell into the very first trap ever set for humanity. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent promised Eve, "You shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Solomon wanted to be like a god. He wanted total knowledge. But he forgot the most basic lesson. Wisdom without obedience is not wisdom. It is madness. Solomon thought he could manage the darkness. He thought he could dance with the devil and lead. But in the end, the darkness managed him. He spent his life building a house for God, but he finished his life building a playground for demons. And the consequences of his actions echoed for 1,000 years, right down to the days of Jesus. But are we any different today? In our final section, we are going to fast forward to the present day, because the spirit of Solomon is still very much alive. The obsession with bloodlines, the secret knowledge, and the desire to merge with the supernatural has not gone away. It has just changed its name.
History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes. As we close this file on King Solomon, we have to look at the world around us today. Does this story sound familiar? A wealthy leader, an obsession with building a new world order, a desire to merge different cultures and religions, and a strange fixation on bloodlines. Look at the modern elite. Look at the royal families of Europe. Look at the great banking dynasties that have controlled the world economy for centuries. Genealogists have often noted a strange pattern among these families. They practice endogamy. That means they marry within their own group. They marry their cousins. They marry into specific lineages over and over again. They tell us this is to keep the wealth in the family. But is that the only reason? Or are they, like Solomon, trying to preserve a specific genetic trait? Are they trying to keep a certain blood pure? The shadow of Solomon is everywhere in the modern world. If you look at the secret societies that shaped Western history, especially the Freemasons, you will find that King Solomon is their central figure. They call him their Grand Master. But ask yourself this: which Solomon are they worshiping? Are they honoring the humble young man who asked God for wisdom to judge the poor? Or are they honoring the sorcerer king who could command demons and build temples with magic? The rituals of these societies are not based on the Bible. They are based on the legends of the Testament of Solomon. They are obsessed with geometry, with architecture, and with the lost word that grants power over the material world. They are still trying to build the temple, not just a building of stone, but a global structure of control. They are still chasing the same lie that destroyed Solomon, the lie of gnosis, the belief that if you just have enough knowledge, enough technology, and enough secrets, you can become like God. Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived, and even he could not handle this darkness. He thought he was playing a game, but he was opening a door that he could not close. So what is the lesson for us? Curiosity is dangerous. There is a reason God forbids the occult. It is not because he wants to hide the truth from us, it is because he wants to protect us. Solomon wanted to know the depths of Satan, and he drowned in them. Do not let your fascination with the dark side lead you away from the light. We investigate these topics not to practice them, but to expose them. The world is moving toward a new era of hybrid technology and genetic modification. The days of Noah and the days of Solomon are returning. We must be vigilant. We must be awake. But we must remain simple in our faith. There are many more files to open. There are many more lies to uncover. The history you were taught in school is just a cover story. If you want to join us as we dig deeper into the forbidden history of the Bible, make sure you are subscribed. Turn on the notifications, because the truth is stranger than fiction, and we are just getting started. This is the end of the Solomon File, but the investigation continues.